Hello and welcome everyone to ET Legal World. I'm your host Monica Behura, and today we are going to discuss and deliberate on the topic generative AI and its impact on legal services and corporate law functions. Generative AI has ignited a lot of anticipation and excitement in the transformative shift in the legal industry. It is poised to not only automate but disrupt the entire legal market in India and globally. So, today, to deep dive into the opportunities, risks, and future of generative AI, we have a team of esteemed panelists. Mr. Ankur Jain, he's the partner at PwCIndia. Ms. Tejal Patil, she's the general counsel at Wipro. She also heads the legal and compliance, global data privacy, and government functions. And Dr. Akhil Prasad, he's the director country counsel at Boeing India. And Gaurav Arora, he's the partner at JSA. So, we should begin. Thank you everyone for coming here and welcome. Ankur, will could you just give us a context of generative AI and its, how it is, what are the opportunities and challenges, and what are the trends that we see in the legal space?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, as you said, maybe let me spend a minute to kind of explain what generative AI is and how is it different from AI or artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has been there in play for many years now, and essentially what we are trying to do there is get the machine to perform tasks like a human, right? So the machine is trained on certain logics, it recognizes certain patterns, and then it is able to perform tasks like human. Generative AI honestly is AI on steroids, as I call it, right? So there's much more to it, and what is it that it does is two things. One, for the first time, what it allows is human beings to interact with a machine in the natural language, which is what is called the natural language processing capability. So I can ask questions and interact without the need to write codes. So that's one major difference. And the other is that it has been trained on large language models. So basically, very deep training is what the models have gone through. So essentially, with these two capabilities coming together, it can therefore generate new content. This new content could be in the form of videos, it could be in the form of songs, as you see, or it could also be in the form of text. And that's where it starts making a significant impact. So it can generate new content, applying logic that it has learned in a very unsupervised training model. So that's what it is. Now, if I was to apply this concept to certain industries and services, consulting, and legal industry is also one of those, I think it can have a significant impact. Let me explain. There are, so any task which requires you to research and go through loads of documents, that task can be significantly automated. Any task on top of that, if it requires you to analyze and review documents, that can also be significantly automated. And we don't stop there. You can also present an outcome or an analysis and a view and can create new documents through this. And as my colleagues and friends here would agree, legal has a lot of those kind of activities. It is much more than that, of course, but it has a lot of those activities, and this is where generative AI is going to make a significant impact. Right.
PwC has been at the forefront of legal innovation and transformation and managing services for clients globally and in India. So, what are the trends and challenges have you seen with the Indian and outside clients?
So maybe I'll to start with, I'll just restrict it to 2 or 3 mega trends the way we see it. We think generative AI in the legal industry space will significantly transform not only the way services are delivered, but the way services are consumed in the legal industry. And maybe as we go through this, we'll talk through some of those examples. So I think that's one major. The second is the impact of this technology, in my view, will be much faster than what most people may otherwise anticipate, right? So in the US, we have seen judiciary already starting to use generative AI to analyze case, to kind of prepare draft notices and so on and so forth. So I think, and that has also started happening in India, by the way, right? So there are use cases where Indian judiciary is trying to leverage generative AI. So I think the impact is going to be much faster. And I think the third most important aspect, in my view, is if you look at the India legal talent and legal services space, it is not limited to us providing services to Indian corporates. There's a large chunk of Indian legal talent which works in the alternate legal service provider (ALSP) sector, or the LPOs as they are called, and also in the global capability centers of large corporates. So I think all those segments are likely to be significantly impacted, especially where it's a low skill, repetitive task. Those sectors are going to be significantly impacted, right? So PwC is doing a lot of investments in this space. Maybe I can talk about that a little later, but largely these are the three broad impacts that I see.
So Indian clients are, they're taking your services.
It's early days. Indian clients. I mean, it's a newer technology, so people are still trying to understand the nuances of this technology. How will it? What are the benefits? What are the challenges? And therefore, adoption will come through. But yes, we are seeing a lot of excitement around this.
So, Ms. Patil, Wipro has been taking a lot of legal tech. So, what do you think that how has Wipro keeping the legal, the risk framework and ethical framework? How has it implied? Uh,
So let me sort of take with what Ankur has said. So AI has been around for a decade, and Wipro has been using AI as a company for a decade. It's only with generative AI that people are understanding that there is a transformation that can take place. So in Wipro, we have an ambition that we want to embed AI in everything that we do. So every solution, every platform, and every offering. With that, we're also transforming ourselves internally, including the functions, which is including the legal function. So some of the things that we're looking at for the legal services is really, like Ankur said, you need to have large data and you need to have scale for this to have impact. Otherwise, your cost benefit analysis doesn't work. Okay. So we're looking at areas today to optimize process, improve productivity, legal compliance, IP. So we look at contracts. IT services have large number of contracts. So in one area that this can be used is contracting, contract management. The second one really is around patents, just managing the intellectual property of the company. The third one we talked about really is regulatory compliance, is how do we, in a global company, we have so many tasks in so many countries and a lot of regulations. So how do we sort of get that together? So we've done a lot of work around this, still working with our vendors in terms of timelines and when to do that. All of this, of course, with this lens of responsible AI and keeping the ethics.
So you spoke about cost efficiency. So what is the cost, cost savings and resource allocation improvements that you've seen after taking generative
So
AI?
we haven't taken the Gen AIs. We are still working on them. So it's all work in progress because a lot of people say that they have the tools, but there is an implementation period. So we're going to see a lot of change in the next 12 to 18 months to see exactly what productivity and cost will happen. But see, with Gen AI, you've got to look at a very different angle. For ethics of Gen AI, you'll also have to look at, I can automate everything I want, but what is the impact environmentally? What is the impact socially? What is the impact on the individual's privacy? So if you don't consider the cost, not just in monetary terms, but also in ethical terms, you don't make the right decisions. So I think this is a journey that we're on. We've seen it with data privacy and now with AI, but I think there are a lot of considerations over the next couple of years that will determine exactly what the productivity will be.
So, Dr. Prasad, so what do you think the importance of, what is the importance of regulatory compliance for the industry that you're in?
See, the short answer is I completely agree with what Tejal and Ankur said. This is a necessary evil. And, if we go back 30 years, 40 years when there were no computers, and from that time to now, you have supercomputers in your pocket in the form of a smartphone. I think this has been a transformative phase, and generative AI will only is very very necessary, whether it's in the part of a contracts, whether it's a part of legal compliance. What we have seen in industry, that generative AI has been embraced for product development, for product and services which are directly related to business. And the reason for that is why it has been very, very easy to do that is because of the proprietary nature of work. So you have technology, you put your proprietary information in that technology, use that generative AI to your benefit. But the moment we talk about legal services, there the input into the generative AI domain is not in your control. So the question is whether it's proprietary, not proprietary, what information gets generated out of the generative AI, whether you can use it, how effectively can you use it. There are a lot of questions. But, whether it is needed, of course, if it brings about efficiency, if it reduces the cycle time of generating contracts, the most important thing where generative AI should definitely be there is in the judiciary, because for a very very long time, we are unfortunately in India, the law enforcement before the court of law has been a big question mark. And I think there are no reasons to say that judiciary or law firms or corporates should not embrace generative AI. But the only question is in what form, after what all development, and I'm sure with companies like PwC, Wipro and others, I'm sure that day is not far where the solutions in terms of generative AI will be embraced by corporates even for legal and compliance work.
So, so far, what have you seen as the impact of the inefficiency
So
of
far, the use has been very, very minimal. So we have seen, for example, if you see the legal database, so we have SCC online, Manupatra online. These things have made our life very much, much better. Those were the days when you were required to invest in huge libraries in a general counsel office. Those days are now gone. So now you can almost do a search using those software, which has become very, very efficient. But the moment that decision making is left to a computer or a software tool of the analysis of a legal situation or of drafting of a contract, that thing still we have not seen. For instance, if we are in a defense industry, if you have to develop a contract, so that contract is governed by the defense procurement policy. So what would generative AI do on drafting a defense contract? Because it's already there. So unless government adopts generative AI to conclude contracts for defense procurement, we may not be able to do or use generative AI to that effect. But for vast generation of contracts, perhaps generative AI is needed. So as of today, at least in my knowledge, I have heard a lot about developments, but I think not many GCs whom we know have so far spoken very highly about those kind of generative AI technologies on legal compliance and contracts, which I think is in the development. I think 1 or 2 years from now, we will start hearing about good products.
Okay. So, Ankur, you have those products in place for the companies. Do you, customize as per the company's requirements?
Yeah. So I think before that, let me put my take on the adoption more specifically. I think I completely agree. It's early days. As we kind of experiment with this technology, try and understand its nuances. So that's certainly there. But what I also think is, like in any other case, you will have to identify the use cases which are more secured, more easier. So as Akhil was saying, going through large volumes of case law, citations, performing legal research is a task which can be reasonably performed in a secured environment in that sense. Using generative AI to draft contracts, especially in a space which is pretty structured and defined, like your NDAs, for example, or certain other such areas. Also for law firms, drafting notices for say, for example, non-payment or check bouncing and stuff like that. I think there are many use cases which are much simpler, and I think we'll see adoption there much faster, right? Adoption in terms of more complex areas where you're relying on technology to advise you, right, in terms of what should be the action or what is the likely outcome going to be. I think that's where it will take a little bit more time. That's my view, right? So that's how the adoption will start. And coming back to technologies, yes, of course, there's a significant investment that we at PwC are making in terms of such tech platforms. We have a very large legal regulatory compliance practice, and one of the use cases that we are working on is about seeing that all the regulatory compliance evidence that you collate, checking the authenticity and accuracy of it is something that we think this technology can help us do in a very secured manner. Similarly, drafting compliance reports. I mean, there's so much of ESG reporting and there's so much of other reporting. Can you use data and synthesize these reports through generative AI? Absolutely. So I think there are use cases that we are working on, and I can talk about that a little bit more in detail later.
Gaurav, tell us about the M&E deals, what are the potential benefits does generative AI have, on critical aspects of deal making and identifying investment opportunities and risk assessment?
See, while M&A is primarily a process-driven activity, and that's why I see this all the more reason why generative AI will have a huge role to play. In current era, global deals around the world, they are structured in a different world, diverse world, different cultures. There are diverse regulatory hurdles, and there are different legal landscapes that parties have to channelize. And therefore, I see that if we have generative AI in place, most of the synergies in terms of cultural, regulatory, and various legal aspects can be traced beforehand, and therefore there are some primary drivers which drive the M&A deals. If those synergies can be found upfront, then I think generative AI will have a huge role to play in making the deal making better. Apart from these primary driving factors, I also feel that generative AI will have a huge role to play in making the deal making easier. By that I mean we all aware that there are already tools in place which are helping the lawyers in generating good first drafts in legal research and also in e-discovery, so to say. So therefore, I feel that with generative AI in place, making the process easier, this will help the deal making a great deal. Apart from that, I also feel that generative AI also has a huge role to play in brand building. Yeah, and once the brand building is in place and there are synergies in place, I feel that the M&A deal will really benefit from generative AI.
Okay, Ms. Patil, I wanted to ask you, as a global company, how does Wipro address the challenges of data protection and risk assessment?
So it's very interesting because the way data privacy laws have really expanded in the world. So we started off with the GDPR in Europe. That was the only legislation really that existed. Today we have 137 countries that have their own data privacy laws. We have always had privacy at our core. From IT services perspective, it's very critical to us. So we've always paid a lot of attention to it, we've resourced it, and we have privacy embedded across the organization. Now what's happened is with AI, it's become privacy plus plus, right? And so AI is actually going a little different way. It's got Europe, which still wants to do the Europe AI Act, but in the rest of the world, you're looking at self-governance in the US, you have NIST standards somewhere else, you have, but I see it going the same way as privacy as well as cybersecurity because all of these are interconnected in terms of laws. So what we've done is we've started off with upskilling our privacy team. So our privacy team now plays the role of also AI trust in the organization. The other piece that we've done is we've created a cross-functional team, because AI ethics and AI governance cannot be done by one function. Because AI in itself is something that has so many considerations. So when we have high-risk AI, we've decided that it has to be a committee, a cross-functional task force of people consisting of representatives from various functions who need to have an opinion on whether this is, something to be done. So I think tracking of regulations is something that I'm personally very invested in, because we are in over 60 countries. So I think that's where the tools will really help. I mean, I'm hoping Gen AI solves that problem for me and tells me exactly what I need to do and does it for me. That would be great. But keeping track of sort of this ambiguity and this transition phase, I think, is something that is difficult, because this is where you're making judgment calls. There's nothing really absolutely black and white. And you sort of ensure that you're trained enough. The second thing I think is really important is we have a responsible use and development of AI policy, just like we have a data privacy policy. And this needs to align with the values of the organization. And when AI aligns, and AI ethics align with your values, it's much easier to apply that judgment.
So, Monica, if I can just step back and Tejal was responding to that piece around data security, data privacy. But if you step back, we need to understand where is this concern stemming from. It's the core nature of this technology, right? What this technology is doing is, as I said earlier, it has been trained on large data models, right? But all that training is unsupervised, right? So when you are applying it to use cases, there is no, the way it has understood certain logics, it will apply those logics and give you an outcome. You cannot start intervening with those logics, right? So that's where it stems from. So what are the challenges of that? There is a challenge of hallucinations, as we call. So this generative AI can actually start creating output which is very different from the real factual accuracy of the data in that sense. So I think that is a big challenge. Of course, there's challenge of deep fakes, where it creates outcome and you're not able to really differentiate what is real vis-a-vis what is machine generated. So that itself is a challenge. She spoke about security and data privacy as challenge. There is also challenge of bias, right? You don't know the logic base which the technology is using, right? So if there is a bias sitting in the data, it will start reflecting in the decisions also, and that's what the judiciary and the courts are most worried about. And then there are other ethical considerations. For example, in US there was this piece where you were trying to understand that if a certain case was to be presented to a particular judiciary, how likely are they to give a judgment in your favor, right? So those then border on the ethical side. So I think there is a lot of those challenges that we'll have to work around. But again, going back to the point, there are more simpler use cases which has lesser of these challenges, right? They're operating more in the factual data world. So I think that's where we'll see adoption first.
So how long will it take to overcome these challenges, Ms. Dr. Prasad?
Yeah, so not about how long, but I think first the fundamental point is, we are talking about legal work. So why does a client come to you? Why does a client go to a GC office? Why does a client go to a law firm? It's for the expert advice. Things cannot go wrong, right? In a judgment by a judge, human error may be acceptable, but an error by a software may not be acceptable through a generative AI. So that is the level of fundamental expertise that generative AI has to reach before it is accepted. So you get my point. A senior counsel's client goes to the senior counsel because they have trust in the counsel. So generative AI, unless it is able to deliver services which can be so trustworthy, and it should not come with a disclaimer that this is a generative AI product, so do not rely on it. It has to be something like a SCC online, that this is a copyright, you are building a lot of trust and confidence on that product. That is where we have to reach. And if we are able to reach at that level, how quickly, we don't know. Only then it will be accepted by the legal fraternity, the products and services which are coming out of a generative AI.
There's a recent study, in fact, on Compass. It's a software used in software by judiciary. It's a profiling-based system wherein judiciary has trying to figure out the bail cases over there. So recent study shows that there's an inherent bias in the system wherein the African Americans are susceptible to do crime twice the rate as the white Americans. That too, when we know the subject areas that they had for those studies, the white Americans had a clear, undeniable history of criminal records. So, of course, that's what I think we have to use generative AI with some caution. And until we reach that stage, it's in a testing mode.
If I can just continue to build on that, with any such technology, the large scale use scenarios will be the first to adopt. So the law firms, the consulting services, technology services, these are the people who are going to adopt it first, right? And then as the prototypes and use cases get more defined, corporates will start using it. And as someone wise has said, you don't start running from day one, right? You crawl, you walk, and then you start running, right? So I think with this technology also we'll see all those phases. It's in my view, it's beyond crawling, closer to walking at this stage, but it will take a
So
bit
you
of
said
time.
PwC has invested heavily in legal tech. So how much, if you could quantify?
So that will differ, but let me try and answer it in this manner. That look, we are very buoyant and very excited about the potential use of generative AI across research and knowledge industries, and legal is certainly one of them. In fact, our tax, legal, and regulatory practice has been at the forefront of some of these investments that PwC is doing. Just to give you a context, in the US, we announced a $1 billion investment along with Microsoft in the Gen AI space, right? Helping our people to understand generative AI and then take it to clients, as we further build on it. We were also amongst the first to announce alliance with Harvey. Harvey is a generative AI platform focused on legal use cases. And the idea is again to see what are those problem statements in the legal services, in the legal corporate space, which needs to be solved. So those are a few examples of large scale investments. But I think coming closer to home, what we are trying to do in India is two things. One, in the first go, our focus is more about exposing people to this technology, getting them to experience it, train them. So a lot of effort is going in that. We have built a very nuanced generative AI curriculums. There is a generative AI in the box program for senior executives, for the developer community, and I'm sure Wipro has that also for the developer community. We've built a lot of forums and very deep training on Gen AI. And it will not be fair to talk about generative AI without talking about prompt engineering. So actually people are being trained on what is called as prompt engineering, which is how would you interact with the system to give more reliable outcome, which Akhil was referring to. So there's a lot of investment in prompt engineering that we're doing. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is we've built a generative AI lab in our Gurgaon, should I say Gurugram office of ours. In fact, that would be the next place where we should do a session like this. And while we're working on many use cases, there are specific use cases on the legal space, and we call it the Legal AI Studio, where we are building these products. I gave you an example of the legal and regulatory, practice and how we are trying to incorporate generative AI there. Gaurav spoke about the M&A practice. Similarly at PwC, there are many service areas which require things like our M&A practice, due diligence, e-discovery, forensic, our regulatory compliance practice all require volumes of documents to be reviewed, analyzed, and then drafted also, right? So those are the use cases which we are trying to build through GenAI. So those are some of the investments that we are making.
Ms. Patil spoke about data privacy laws and protection in different jurisdictions. In India, we just recently passed the Data Protection DBDP Act, but it hasn't explicitly spoken about generative AI. So, Dr. Prasad, how would it align?
The act has been passed. I think we are waiting for the rules, and I'm sure this will be taken care of, because when you hear our IT minister, he has been very, very passionate about making it a big success story for India, and India leading the world in terms of data privacy regulations. That is how I see it. India definitely has, with its most recent laws, has been on the forefront in terms of that vision of making it a multi-trillion economy. I think this is one of the very important aspects, the developments on generative AI in legal field, which perhaps will be a strong endorsement to that effect, that because of this, we have transformed the judicial system, transformed the legal system. If we are able to, this is a huge opportunity for us. And if we are able to power it in that way, thanks to the new regulations, I think that dream of making India the best place to invest is definitely a reality. So now, with good laws, good regulations, a good development needs to happen, and we have enough players like Wipro and others, and with PwCs, that knowledge is there. We really have to think together, develop a program, and let and demonstrate to the world that India is leading on generative AI on legal services as well. If you are able to do that, I think it will be a very, very strong and positive message.
Is there a need to have a regulatory body for checks and balances for generative AI? No.
I
Yes.
think there are too many regulators.
I think part of the main body only. But considering that EU and US, they already have proposals in place for specialized AI regulations focusing on data privacy, we are very much optimistic that the rules will cater to that. But I don't see a need of a specialized regulatory body for that.
I would think it should be best self-regulated. There are enough laws, enough regulators. Less intervention, the better.
I will echo the part that India has a very important role to play on the global stage. Yes. Because we are in a very unique position where we can play a neutral role, where we can actually use our laws or regulations or self-governance for the benefit of the users. Because if you see, a large number of countries in the world are going to be the consumers and the users and those affected by AI. Not all who are developing AI, because generative AI especially requires a very large capital outlay, right? So we will be the ones who will be making the apps, whose data will be used. We will be the consumers. So I think India's role is very unique. Secondly, just in terms of regulation versus not regulation, a lot of our laws have stood the test of time. We've had laws that have been in place for a long time. It's not necessary to always create a separate law or a separate regulator, but it is important to educate the existing regulators on these aspects, because it's going to be pervasive. AI is not going to be isolated development or use in one part. It's going to, it's going to be used in every single department. It's going to be used for consumers. It's going to affect the consumer department. It's going to be used for vendors. It's going to be used in public procurement. It's going to be used everywhere. So how would you sort of take it out and make it separate versus saying that everybody now should be geared for this?
So there has to be an overhaul.
I mean, as everyone is saying, I think this is a little too early to talk about regulating generative AI in that sense, right? As I said, it's an infant trying to crawl, walk. You don't regulate kids at that stage, right? You let them, find their ground, and then regulation makes sense. I think Tejal earlier spoke about putting up a cross-functional team to analyze the impact. I think it's those kind of self-regulatory mechanisms that organizations need to put in place. I'm sure Boeing is also doing that, and many other large organizations are doing it. I think if I can leave you with 2 or 3 practices, that we are trying to adopt at PwC. We also have a tech risk framework where any technology, and certainly for generative AI, that PwC starts using for providing services or starts delivering to clients need to go through certain rigorous procedures from that point of view. So I think that's a good practice, having a cross-functional team which can proactively start engaging and providing guardrails to the use of generative AI is very, very critical, right? And you can only provide guardrails. You can't, because the technology is so complex, you can't start dictating or intervening from that point of view. You can provide guardrails. So I think that is one thing that we've done. The second is look at some simpler controlled use cases, right? So that's where you can make a difference. Pick up the use cases where the guardrails will work for sure. So I think that's another strategy. What we have done, at least when I spoke about the generative AI lab, we have in a way segregated the experiment and the build out activities from the rest of the network, right? So you isolate and you build, and then once you have confidence, then only you kind of incorporate. And the last that I would want to point out is simple things like ChatGPT, right? What we are trying to do is we are trying to get onto an enterprise graded version of it at PwC, so that our staff can start using it to do their work, right? That doesn't mean the output that goes to clients will have to necessarily go through all the reviews that it otherwise does, right? But at least they can start using and experimenting. So I think those are 3-4 examples that I thought could be useful as we
I
start.
think that's the only way that you can balance this whole aspect of data privacy protection as well. You have to have cross-functional teams, have guardrails in place, and test them out before you roll out the technology so that you know what's at stake. And that's the only way to balance the AI innovation and data protection, because data is fuel for AI. You can't have any other way around it.
So AI involves the processing of sensitive information and a lot of confidential information. So how does AI, protect the data privacy compliance?
As I just mentioned, see, the only approach to solve for this is to have a balanced approach. Organization needs to have cross-functional teams working on the technology and ensure that whatever goes or fed into the system, it's in compliance with the regulations worldwide, so to say. And then not only what is fed in the system, also the output out of this before it's rolled out. So that's the only way I feel that there can be synergies between data protection and AI innovation.
So,
IP
so you wanted to
protection
say
also, right?
something?
IP protection is the other big one.
Yeah, so that's precisely my point when I said what I said initially is use of generative AI. The big question mark is whose proprietary information is there inside that whole system, and that adds to the burden of compliance to the GC office and to the law firms.
So I think when you talk about IP laws or data privacy laws, see, the thing is, they have to be reimagined, right? Even IP laws today have to be reimagined for the future.
Very good point.
So I think it will be work in progress. There will be some turbulence, and like in many cases, maybe we will lead with judicial decisions. Sometimes you do have to have some cases for people to realize what can go wrong and then legislate for it. It's very difficult when technology moves so fast to legislate first.
Yeah.
And then figure out what's going to go wrong, because it's not, you
it
cannot
has to be
imagine,
done. Yeah.
what's going to go wrong.
Yes.
So maybe it will take that path.
See, law will always follow the development in technology. Technology will move much faster.
Yes. So, Dr. Prasad, I had a question for you. Do you think this, it will affect the job market? Many big tech firms have expressed this concern.
So when I was in school, which was many decades ago, I still do not remember when I was in school. But when I was in school, we did not have computers. And when computers came, it was the same question whether people will lose jobs. But India has become the largest IT software provider to the world. So artificial intelligence will only increase capabilities. I don't think it will make lives better. It is for, it will make us more efficient. I definitely do not think it will take up jobs. It will make people more efficient and better. That's how we see it.
I mean, what we're doing now is upskilling our entire workforce. Because you have to, the same way as he talked about a simple thing of computers or internet, you have to learn to use that skill. So I think the critical part for the country is going to be making its workforce ready for what's coming. And I think this investment in skilling is something that the government is actively looking at, and all the large corporations are actively looking at, to say, let's teach you, what's going to come, and then, upskill.
See, I mean, to both Dr. Akhil Prasad and what Tejal said, I also believe that generative AI will not replace lawyers, right? So Gaurav is safe from that point of view. But what it will certainly do is it will replace those professionals who who don't use generative AI. So professionals who use and know how to use generative AI will start replacing professionals who don't. And that's where the upskilling business comes into play.
In India, where everybody has about 1.5 phones in pocket, everybody is using technology. Even from any economic level, you see anybody from that level, everybody is using digital payment. If you go to a vendor pawn shop, Paytm. So where is the risk of
Yeah, so I
not
think as
embracing
Akhil is
technology?
saying, our ability to adopt to technology is probably in this country far better.
Though I've given that little caveat that the legal fraternity is kind of amongst the slowest. I think lawyers tend to think that nobody can be as smart as them, and therefore a machine certainly can't. So I feel like our adoption in legal services has been slower than it should have been. There are a lot of products in the market that the lawyers are not using, the ones that exist today, let alone the ones that are going to get developed in the future. The other thing that Ankur spoke about is prompt engineering. So one would think that, lawyers have logical, analytical skills. Therefore, prompt engineering and skills required for AI or Gen AI would come naturally, but they don't. So it is going to be a big mindset shift for the legal community to start interacting with the machine more.
And so, Gaurav, can you tell us how this technology will reshape the future of law firms, ALSPs, and LPOs?
I would deal with this into two parts. First, impact of this Gen AI on various processes, and then impact of this technology on legal rights of various parties. See, as far as the processes are concerned, we all are aware that there are already tools in place. Of course, those tools are yet not sophisticated to an extent that they can handle complex transactions, so to say. But with the kind of pace that technology is improving, the day is not far where we'll see those tools handling complex drafts as well. But as far as Gen AI having an impact on various legal rights, I'll be slightly cautious on that. Of course, I understand Ankur mentioned he was very passionate about using the technology in judiciary. Dr. Prasad also mentioned that we should use the technology in judiciary. Of course, there's a need for that. But wherever technology impacting legal rights of parties, I'd like to take a caution. As I mentioned earlier, that there have been case studies around the globe that there could be certain biases around the technology. So therefore, I would like to think that let the processes start first and then implement technology on certain aspects which have implications on legal rights of parties.
Okay. So, any concluding remarks as we come to the end of the session? Dr. Prasad?
I completely endorse to the view that this is a fantastic development that generative AI has to play a big role in transformation of legal services. We have a long way to go, but if we are able to marry the two, the first identify the legal problems, which I think firms like PwC are already doing, that this is where we need technology to transform, and then we bring about services, or the software with our, Wipro and TCS and Infosys. I'm very, very positive that the day is not far where we have those kind of services which is going to transform the legal services in India. and the kind of products and services we need for a better turnaround on legal work, whether it's at the court level, whether it's in the lawyer's office, whether it's wherever it may be.
Okay, okay. Ms. Patil?
So basically, the train has left the platform and it's going to go and develop at its own pace. I think we just need to understand that there are risks. So when we are going to use this, we have to be very cognizant of the fact of not getting carried away and be very real about what is the problem that we are trying to solve. And let's not create more problems in trying to solve a problem that may not be that large.
So I think Tejal summarized it really well. I'll just take a cue from her earlier statement. I think in my view also the legal function has been slightly slower in terms of adoption of technology, and with the word of caution that Gaurav shared, I think this is that one moment where while we have been slow in adopting technology, but we can actually leapfrog with generative AI kind of technologies in that sense. But of course, it has to be done in a cautious, phased manner in that sense. So, which is what Tejal said. So, absolutely agree.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all for being a part of this vibrant discussion. As we now come to an end to this enlightening discussion on generative AI and its impact on legal services and corporate law functions, as we all heard that there is a consensus among the panelists that generative AI is the present and the future, and they are open to its adoption and implementation, but it has to be done in a right and a phased manner. So here we conclude the session. Thank you. Thank you so much.